Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam Ishvaro Guratmeti Murti Veda Vivakine Vyomavad Yavda Dehaya Dakshinamurtiya Namaha Sarva Vedanta Siddhanta Gocharam Tamagocharam Govindam Paramanandam Sadguru Pranatosmyam. Quick revision. We've already started Panchadashi and I'm going to revise it the third time so that you're absolutely clear with the fundamental terms that we're going to use, because these terms will be used throughout the text and thus they deserve to be understood. So, we have started with the word, we use the word Maya. So now we ask, what is Maya? And Maya we also compare to Prakriti. And Prakriti is made up of Trigunaha. In other words, Maya and Prakriti are one and the same terms, and therefore they are made up of Trigunas. So this Prakriti, which is Maya, is split into, so we'll write a diagram. And then this Prakriti, in Brahman there's a power called Maya, and this Maya is split into two categories: Shuddha Prakriti and Ashuddha Prakriti. Okay? Shuddha Prakriti is Sattva Guna dominant. Ashuddha Prakriti is Rajaguna, Tamaguna dominant. It doesn't mean that Sattva Guna lacks Rajatama, or the Rajatama lacks Sattva Guna. It's just that the majority is Sattva Guna and the majority is Rajatama, Rajas and Tamas. When Brahman identifies with the reflection, with the sattvic reflection, we call that Ishvara. When Brahman identifies with Ashuddha Prakriti, that is predominantly Rajas and Tamas, we call that Jiva, or we call that causal body. So causal body comes as a result of Ashuddha Prakriti. Why? What is causal body? Ignorance, avidya. In other words, I don't know. There is nothing to know. Why is that the case? Because it lacks its majority Rajas and Tamas. It doesn't have the purity of Sattva Guna, therefore it doesn't have total knowledge. So again, I'm going to describe the terms on the board. Shuddha Prakriti, pure Sattva Guna. Ashuddha Prakriti, Sattva is contaminated by Rajas and Tamas. And when Sattva dominates, this Prakriti is called Maya. And when Rajas and Tamas dominate, this Prakriti is called Avidya. Avidya is what? Causal body. That means the total cause of the entire universe. All of the karmas, all of the vasanas, everything, all the samskaras of the total. And also we define Ishvara, Shuddha Prakriti, therefore, we're talking about Shuddha, pure Sattva, reflects Brahman, and when this reflection of Brahman is identified with Maya, that is Sattva Guna, then we call that Ishvara. So what is Ishvara? Pure Sattva Guna. Not that it's only Sattva Guna, but predominantly Sattva Guna. Also, what is Jiva? When this Ashuddha Prakriti reflects Brahman. So therefore Jiva is when Ashuddha Prakriti, which is predominantly Rajas and Tamas, reflects original consciousness, we call that Ashuddha Prakriti. So now we know what a Jiva is. Someone tell me, what is a Jiva?
reflection of Brahman was predominantly Rajas and Tamas.
Yeah, and what is Ishvara?
Sattvic.
Predominantly Sattva.
When original consciousness is identified with pure Sattva guna, we then call that Ishvara. When original consciousness, i.e. Brahman, is identified with Rajas Tamas, which is Ashuddha Prakriti, we call that Jiva or causal body. Okay. So let's just introduce and remember the primary terms so that we're all on the same page. Any questions so far? Okay. Now I'm going to summarize what we've done so far in a chart. And we just have to listen and follow along. So what we have explained so far is Brahman, original consciousness, okay? In Brahman, there's an inherent power called Maya. Maya is divided into two categories, Shuddha, Ashuddha. So we've done this much. Now, let's talk quick story of creation. How do we go from there all the way into creation, into the subtle body, into the causal and the subtle body? We'll just look at the right side. Ashuddha Prakriti is dominantly tamas and rajas. We all on the same page so far? Mm-hmm. Now, when you take out of that tama guna portion, so remember, we're talking here, this entire section, okay, is Maya. Okay, that whole thing is Maya. When we take out of that Maya, which consists of the three gunas, when we take tama guna, we create subtle elements. These subtle elements, space, air, fire, water, earth, are called tanmatras. Okay, that means out of the tama guna, we create subtle elements. So what just happened so far? The subtle elements are already tama guna. They're already impure. Because we didn't create the subtle elements out of pure sattva or rajas, but we took the most dense guna, the most material guna, and out of that we created the subtle elements. Now note, so far these subtle elements are not physical. They are subtle in nature. This means at this point there is no creation yet. Everything is still an idea. Okay, so far, out of the tamaguna, we have created the subtle elements. Now what happens next is, each of these subtle elements also has the three gunas, okay? So it's not like just because we take the tamaguna, it's not like they're all now tamaguna. Remember, predominantly tamaguna, you understand? So space is predominantly tamaguna, air predominantly, fire, water, earth predominantly tamaguna, but they also have sattva, rajas, and tamas. Okay. Now, when we take the sattva of each of the five elements, so we take sattva guna of space, sattva guna of air, sattva of fire, water and earth, we only take the sattva guna, we create jnana indriya. That means organs of perception. Now, before I go to give you some context, what are the five elements? They are the constituents of the world. It's what creates the world. In order to sense the world, I need organs of knowledge. I need to know about the world. But what's the world made of? Five elements. So this means I need a sense organ for every one of the constituents which make up the whole world. I need eyes to see the property of space, which is sound. So I need ears in order to hear. I need skin. I need to feel the environment, which is a property of air. I need to see the environment, see form, and form is a property of fire. I need to taste the environment, and taste, tongue, taste is a property of water, and smell is a property of earth. That's why we are given the five senses. Is that clear so far? So in other words, in order to taste the world, I need to be given tongue. In order to smell the world, I need to be given nose. In order to see the world, I need to be given eyes. So therefore, at this point, jnana indriyas are already created. The 5 organs of knowledge, or 5 sense organs. We are not talking about physical eyes, physical ears. When I say organs, I'm just talking about faculties. The faculty which makes seeing possible. The faculty which makes hearing possible. So out of all of the sattva, out of the sattva we create hearing. Out of the sattva of air we create the ability to feel. Okay, so that's done so far. Any questions? Okay, we move on then. Now, so we're done with the sattva guna of each. Now, what happens when you go sattva guna of space, air, fire, water, and earth, and you add them all together? So we have S of space, S of A, S of F, S of water, and S of earth. We plus them all together. We create what? What's called the antahkarana, the subtle body. Now, why is the subtle body created at this point? Simple, because if you think about jnana indriya, in order to receive the knowledge, it has to be contained somewhere, at some faculty. So the next natural conclusion, after having created jnana indriya, is to store that data in some place, quote, store, to make it available, processed at some place. Thus we have, at this point, the antahkarana. Now, what happens when we take the rajas aspect of each of these subtle elements? Rajas of space, rajas of air, rajas of fire, rajas of water, rajas of earth. Well, when we take just the rajas aspect, out of the rajas aspect of space, we create faculty for speech. When we take the rajas aspect of air, we create the faculty of hands. That means these are your karma indriyas. That means your 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 organs of action by which I can deal with the world. So far, what has been developed? The ability to pick up knowledge, to see the world. Next, also we have created the ability to sense the world, the ability to store that sense data in a antahkarana, in the subtle body. Now we have also created the organs of action by which we can maneuver in this world, by which we can exhaust our karmas, by which we can learn, by which we can do whatever is necessary according to our sanchita or prarabdha karma. So far, this is preparing the jiva for the physical body. Nothing has been created yet in the universe. Everything's still an idea. Not even the Big Bang has come at this point. Now, when you add rajas of space, plus rajas of air, plus rajas of fire, plus rajas of water, plus rajas of earth, you get prana. That means, by this point, Annamaya Kosha has been created. No, Annamaya Kosha is not there yet. The Sukshma Sharira has been created, and also Pranamaya Kosha has been created. In other words, the Antahkarana consists of what? Manomaya, Vijnanamaya Kosha. So, Manomaya Kosha created, Vijnanamaya Kosha created, and now Pranamaya Kosha also has been created. And this Antahkarana consists of 17 faculties in total. 5 is what? 5 organs of perception, plus 5 organs of movement, of action, plus 5 pranas, plus manomaya, vijnanamaya. The doubting mind and the decisive intellect. In total, 17 components are now ready for what? Dealing with the world that is yet to come, that is yet to manifest in the physical aspect. So now we're seeing a story of creation, how first the subtle elements, how the jiva is prepared in order to be put into the physical world. Now, I'm speaking very dualistic terms here. I'm speaking like put, prepare, all time-bound. See, there's no other way to put this. So I'm giving you like a time aspect, like a consecutive time aspect, but there is no such thing as first came the indriya, first came, then the karma, then the antakarana. That's only what a mind can conceive.
You're putting more and more limits, you're limiting it to more and more tightly, to the point where it actually manifests.
Yeah. Everything just, boom, comes. But there's nothing to explain. If I just say, yeah, okay, you want to hear story of creation? Poof. There, let's go home. So therefore, we give you this consecutive order that may appear dualistic or time-bound, but that's the only way to explain it.
Well, as soon as you put limits on it, by definition, it becomes dualistic.
Yes. Okay. Now, remember the jiva? The jiva is what? Remember from memory?
Rajas. From the Raja.
Rajas and
Rajas.
reflections. Rajas and tamas.
When Brahman is identified with Ashuddha Prakriti, which is predominantly Rajas and Tamas, that is a jiva. Now, when this jiva, which you now know the definition of, is identified with the causal body, that is the Ashuddha Prakriti, because it is predominantly Rajas and Tamas, we call that Rajna Jiva. These are important terms that we need to establish at the beginning of the text. And when the same jiva is now identified or goes even farther away from Brahman, from the subtlest of the subtlest, we then give that a name called Taijasa Jiva. Now we continue verse 25. Okay, so there was a revision up to verse 24. Okay, let's read. We have permission to look. Okay, verse 25. Ishvara is called totality, samashti, because of Ishvara's sense of identification with all the subtle bodies of the universe. So, remember how we described the subtle body being 17 constituents? That's just for one jiva. Now, when you add all of the infinite bodies, infinite subtle bodies in the entire universe, then we call that Hiranyagarbha. That is the total mind. This total mind is called Samashti. So what is Samashti? That means knowledge of everything, all like sarvajnanam. So when we say God is all knowledge, what are we actually referring to? Ishvara's subtle body, Hiranyagarbha specifically, because it's very vague just to say all knowledge. God is all knowledge. So now we add specificity to it. Okay. The other, the Taijasa, is called individual, because it lacks this knowledge and is conscious only of his or her own self, being identified with his or her own subtle body. So in other words, summary, Taijasa, jiva, is individual, subtle body, Hiranyagarbha is all subtle bodies put together. In other words, all Taijasa subtle bodies put together. Okay, now we're going to read commentary. Ishvara sees all subtle bodies as itself. Taijasas, that is plural, are only identified with themselves, thus see differences in comparison to others. My mind's different to yours. Because of this difference, I see myself as not you. because we don't have the same thinking. This is the working of avidya, how we attribute importance to differences, and then we, on the basis of that, say, I am not you. Therefore, I have the right to go against you, to compete against you, to hurt you, and so on. Okay, commentaries. When the jiva gains control, we're talking about the person now, in the world, over prakriti, that is matter, that means your body, our thoughts that are constantly running all day, only then he or she realizes its own nature as Sat Chit Ananda. So first instruction, gain control over matter. Now you're going to say how? This will be mentioned in verse 34, when we start to do Panchakosha Viveka, 5 sheets negation. So don't worry about the how yet. Hence the need for spiritual sadhana to be able to come out of the clutches of Prakriti. So therefore now we know the reason for spiritual practice. To come out of the very Prakriti that is holding us down, keeping us limited in this world. Prakriti is dvandvatmika, which means it's the nature of opposites. Day, night, heat, cold, love, hate, up, down, and so on. Like, dislike, and so on. Something that we can all relate to, right? Rich, poor, and so on. Overcoming Prakriti is to accept, this is an instruction, the world which exists in the pairs of opposites. This means if you do not share my beliefs, you do not share my religion, different color, different race, then as long as I keep seeing you as someone to modify, to correct, press different buttons, to reprogram, right? Then that is reinforcing my own separation from the total. Therefore, that is only causing and persisting samsara for the very individual who is against another. So you see how we cannot get out of this by cheating. There's no cheating here. I can't say, I don't like you. Because now I've just taken the entire total, which you are, and I'll say a part of me I don't like. And I projected that onto you. So therefore, there's no cheating out of the system. One has to what? Accept the world in the pairs of opposites. Now, when we say accept, let's get realistic. We're not saying now go and hug a murderer. We're just saying be objective about it. Don't put pluses or minuses. See it as just karma playing out. The person can't help themselves. You know, they're going through, they're doing the best that they can according to their education. So look at it objectively. Be a psychologist instead of a judge. Or even a judge is objective in the court. But a psychologist, what is a psychologist? He generally looks at the condition of the patient, and he doesn't sort of put, oh, you're a fool. He doesn't say that. He looks at, well, let me show you what's the process going on that is making you do what you do. So it's very objective. In the same way, be towards the world like that. Such a sadhana should lead to unconditional and reasonless love for everyone without a trace of bitterness. In other words, I don't need a reason to love you, and I don't need you to love me in order for me to love you back. That's none of my business whether you love me or not. This is the attitude of someone who is practicing this instruction. Now, what makes them think like this? What gives them the strength to love without reason? Give me some ideas.
Knowledge of self and knowledge of non-duality.
Good, yeah. So they have to first ascertain this very deeply. That takes time, right? What
Seeing
else?
God everywhere.
Excellent. Yeah, that's the safest way, because if I see this, that means I have to now see the God in myself in order to relate and see God in others. So once again, knowledge and seeing God all comes under what? a lot of time, a lot of education, a lot of inquiry in order to ascertain this teaching. Otherwise, it becomes intellectual and it's only applicable in class. It's only applicable with people we love. But with others, it's not applicable. So that's not the idea. Therefore, to come out of Dvandva and accept everyone and everything without comment and without rejection is to conquer one part of Prakriti, the external. So we have conquered step one. Step one is what? Accept everyone as they are. Look at everything objectively. How? Realize what is common here. So you look at what is common between us right now. That's all we have to do. Now, next. When the external Prakriti is brought under control with no raga, dvesha, likes or dislikes, which are causing perpetual agitations. So what causes us to be agitated all day in one way or the other?
Likes and dislikes.
Because likes and dislikes cause me to be triggered towards the environment. As soon as someone doesn't look like according to how I expect them to be, or they don't say something how I wish them to say it, even the words "I love you," if you don't say it in a certain tone, in a certain pitch, in a certain tempo, in a certain speed, in a certain time, then my dislike is going to get triggered. And I'm not going to what? I'm not going to accept you, therefore I remain in ignorance. So therefore, likes and dislikes are what keeps us fundamentally locked in samsara. Continuing, then only can one deal with the inner Prakriti. Okay, so now we're going from the external to the internal. In order to go to from the external, which includes accepting everything as it is through what I see, I now have to go internal. That is the mind. How do you go internal? Managing likes and dislikes. What's a sadhana for managing likes and dislikes? According to Bhagavad Gita, maybe?
Yeah.
Karma yoga?
Yeah.
Okay. Or Vipassana, which we're doing. Okay, in other words, there's no cheating or bypassing Ishvara's eternal order. One of the order is, I cannot understand grade 5 unless I go through grade 1, 2, 3, 4. I cannot assimilate that knowledge unless the mind has first learned the basics, the fundamentals. Therefore, we cannot shortcut. So this is why Vedanta is so great, is because, and why the classes usually are not that big, is because we don't allow someone to come in and give me the best, give me a pill, a moksha pill, right? That's an unqualified person. They have to go through a certain sequence, and that takes years. And they have to be gladly doing it. Why? Because they're offering the results only to none other than Ishvara. Until one can actually, assimilate and arrive to this knowledge properly. So there's no cheating here. What happened so far in up to verse 25? Stage 1 and 2 of creation is complete. What is stage 1? Brahman identified with Shuddha Prakriti, which is Maya, equals Ishvara. Ishvara means pure knowledge, total knowledge, Sarva Jnanam. Stage 2 is also complete, which is when Brahman identified with Ashuddha Prakriti, which is dominant Rajas and Tamas, and this is called avidya, ignorance. This is when causal body is created. Because, why? Sattva guna is total knowledge. Only to the contamination of sattva guna, it now creates ignorance of total knowledge. Therefore, causal body. Okay, what's next? Stage 3 is coming. Now we're preparing for the physical world. causal subtle body are created so far. So far. For experience, that means to experience the world, the physical world and the body is needed. Introduction to conversion from 5 subtle elements to 5 gross elements is now the subject matter. Everything is still a thought at this point. In fact, there is no at this point, there never was a point, but as I said, we're putting a time-based sequence to creation. Any questions so far? We're speaking about the process of creation according to the Vedas. Okay, verse 26. For the experience of Taijasa Jivas, why Taijasa? Taijasa is what Jiva identified with?
Individual.
With individual subtle body. So far, the Jiva is only in the dream state. Okay? For the experience of Taijasa Jivas, and also for creating the objects of experience and the house for living for the Jiva, Ishvara grossifies each of the 5 subtle elements, and they're called tanmatras. So tanmatras equals 5 subtle elements through a process called panchikarana. Okay? So the verse is saying Ishvara is now going to grossify even further these 5 subtle elements and create out of these 5 subtle elements gross elements. Gross elements means, in scientific language, energy or matter that we can perceive. Something that we can see. In fact, this is the gross world, made out of what? Gross elements. So by verse 26, the world is not created yet, but it's being prepared. Okay, commentaries. Consciousness plus, what's consciousness? Original consciousness. Plus the causal and subtle bodies is not sufficient for experience. That's obvious. It requires material elements. The world. And a gross body. The sense organs, both the karma and the indriya, which are in the subtle body, the antahkarana that is, minus the physical sense instruments are useless. So again, what use is your mind without a body? That's what it's saying. Useless. So we need to create something more at this point. Once the creation gets to the subtle stage, Ishvara has to create gross elements out of the subtle elements and fashion a physical body that you're now enjoying out of them so that the jiva can work out their karmas. So we're talking about the creation of your physical body here. How Ishvara is fashioning your body. Okay. Okay, the commentaries further. The dream world, the world that we dream every night, which is to be identified with the subtle body, and that is called what? Taijasa Jiva. So this means when every one of us dreams tonight, we are all what? Taijasa Jiva. When we are all in deep sleep, we are what? Prajna Jiva. Okay, we're establishing basic terms. The dream world is insufficient to exercise dharma because of instability or rapidity of subtle thoughts. Meaning a physical world or body is required for solidity. can you go for a coffee for 10 minutes in your dream? Right? Because see, in a dream, if you ask for a coffee, what do you get back? A Mickey Mouse or something. It is so unstable in a dream that I cannot do anything there. It is still a world we understand. There is still images, there's still sounds, but they're so rapid in nature, they're so fleeting that I cannot do anything. I cannot even think there properly for more than 5 minutes. So therefore, Ishvara has to create something that in which we can work with, something tangible, something concrete. If I put this here, if I come back 5 minutes later, I can predict safely that it's going to be here. It's not going to be somewhere else. It's not going to be something different. For that, I need a physical world. Continuing. Ishvara is pure sattva guna. Sattva guna means all knowledge. So Ishvara enjoys itself by itself without the aid of sense organs, sense instruments and sense objects. Now when we say Ishvara enjoys, we're not saying now Ishvara is a person who is enjoying itself. Ishvara is fullness. So this is just semantics. Owning to the full nature of Ishvara, there's no need to enjoy because you're already all fullness. Whereas jivas, that is us, under the spell of avidya, enjoy and suffer intermittently, owing to the presence of rajas and tamas in their subtle bodies. That's why we suffer. Why do we suffer? Because we are at any moment blocked from total knowledge. Thus, we do not know our nature. We know only certain things. We know how to chop wood, make a cake. We know how to fix something. But that's not the whole. That's very small knowledge. And only to this, what do we do all our lives? We remove ignorance about different things. That's all we're doing in our life. We're removing ignorance. Does anyone know here how to speak French?
A little bit.
Okay, suppose you know nothing. And so then what do? We go to a country like France, and then we're what? We're agitated that I don't know how to speak French. So then what do I have to do? I have to remove my ignorance of French speaking. Why? Because there is rajas and tamas in this mind. What is a jiva? What is a jiva? Brahman identified with Ashuddha Prakriti, rajas and tamas. That is why all a jiva does in its entire life is learn things. In other words, it removes ignorance pertaining to different subjects. I'll remove ignorance how to do a ritual. Remove ignorance how to perform, how to market. Remove ignorance how to talk. Remove ignorance how to walk. Remove ignorance how to add basic numbers. Remove ignorance how to shake someone's hand in a particular culture. Remove ignorance how to look appealing in clothes. That's all we do in our whole life. Just remove ignorance one day after another. And because of that, suffering. Although, continuing, constant enjoyment is possible by the jiva. Relative constant enjoyment. If the individual's subtle body is predominantly sattvic. So this means when you see someone who is generally okay in life, they're generally happy, they're generally cheerful, it only means what? What does that mean?
Sattvic.
Yeah, the mind is sattvic only to what? Past sadhana. And anyone who is, the more you are in the world, what does the world do? Throws pebbles in a river. The more pebbles in the river, the more ripples in the river. The more ripples, the less reflective that river becomes. Therefore, the less reflective it becomes of what? Brahman. Because Brahman is reflecting consciousness identified with rajas and tamas. Therefore, the more or the less ripples there are in the mind, the less extroverted we are, the more still that river, thus the greater the reflection of our original nature, and that translates through the BMI as what? General cheerfulness, general okayness. I'm all right. Okay, continuing. For the enjoyment of the jiva, that means at the physical level now, it was stated that out of the original material, tamaguna, because remember, out of tamaguna came what? Subtle elements. And out of those, tamaguna of those subtle elements came what? Will come what? The gross elements. Out of the original material, tamaguna, that is produced in the form of the tanmatras, that is the subtle elements that I just described, the sukshma sharira is created. Okay, so what does this just say? In order to enjoy the physical world, I need a subtle body. Because the data has to go somewhere. Now the third aspect of the tamaguna and the process of grossification it undergoes to create the sthula sharira. This means the tamaguna will now be further used from the 5 subtle elements to create the physical body. Is dealt with. So we're now going to deal with this. Okay, it's just introducing us. 2 things are created, or will be created, in order for this physical world to exist, to be proper. The first is bhogya vastu, which means objects of enjoyment. Imagine you're put in a room without any objects. Can enjoyment be possible?
If you meditate.
It's like highly irrational creation.
Don't link with the environment, just meditate.
Right, that would be a really strange creation. Just put the jiva in a white room.
It's like, very peaceful.
Well,
That
No, but
depends.
that's if you're born into that
That's
situation.
enjoyment.
It's blank.
If you don't know anything better, that's good.
yeah, but you can only say that in reference to having objects. Right? If we just put in a white room, we don't know we can't even say that because we have never experienced agitations owing to the externalization of the mind towards objects. Yeah. Okay, so 2 things are created. First, objects of enjoyment. In this case, today, it's the iPhone. And the house. The house means the body. So if I just put an iPhone somewhere and there's no body to enjoy it, that's a useless creation. There needs to be a physical body which can touch this and go, oh, camera, megapixels and so on, right? We need a physical body for that. How is this done? So how are these 2 things created? By the will, continuing, by the will of the Lord, all the 5 subtle gross elements undergo a process of grossification called panchikarana. Just imagine it like this. You put flour in a bowl. You know how flour is, you can like shake it, it's like blow it, it goes out. Now you just add water and it becomes dense. Okay, so what I just do? I converted something that's very fluid in nature. You can blow it, you touch flour, it's like you're not touching anything. And you add something, and it now takes on a muddy substance, a much more grossified form. That's what panchikarana is. For example, taking just one of these 5 subtle elements, namely the water in this case, the definition of water in Vedanta Shastra is that because of which taste is possible. I described earlier on, the water is an element. in order, the property of this water is taste. But this water also produces a karma indriya, that means the tongue, in order to taste the property of water. So therefore, water is because of which taste is possible. What is fire? Fire is that because of which seeing form is possible. So this means we can only see only to the element of fire. The rasa, the hearing aspect, is the tanmatra of water. So in other words, the hearing, the tasting aspect is the subtle element of water. It cannot be seen. You cannot see the faculty of tasting. We can infer it. How? By the fact that I can taste. Therefore, the grossification is that process by which the unseen 5 subtle elements, called tanmatras, are brought to our cognition as objects of knowledge. So, what's happening is these 5 subtle elements are now about to be grossified, and because of their grossification, the prior 17 constituents in the subtle body are going to be able to pick that grossified world up. That's why first the subtle body and then the physical world. Now, how this grossification takes place is explained in the next verse. Okay, what's next? I'm just going to revise now. Panchikarana, the formula how subtle 5 elements convert to gross 5 elements as preparation to the gross body of the universe. We're now preparing for the physical world. And summary, the tamaguna of the 5 subtle elements, that means of space, air, fire, water, earth, you take the tamaguna of each of those 5 subtle elements and you make 5 gross elements. The sattva and the raja do not undergo grossification. Okay? So the sattva and raja of what? Of the 5 elements. So again, we've got the 5 subtle elements. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Each one of them have 3 guna. Okay? Only the tama aspect is going to be used in order to create 5 gross elements. Okay? The rajas and the sattva, for each one of them, is left alone. Only the tamaguna is going to be taken out of each of the 5 subtle elements. Now, revision so far. Maya, or prakriti, in other words, out of that prakriti, we take the tamaguna and we create the 5 subtle elements. And then further, the tamaguna of the 5 subtle elements that I just described here, we create 5 gross elements. Okay, how do we do this? Now we go to the formula. So what happens is, we have 5 subtle elements. 1, 2, 3. Actually, we're going to do it in like this. 1, 2. Okay, they are subtle. Space, air, fire, water, earth. So we're going to now take the tamaguna of each, remember, in order to create the gross elements. We already established that. We're only going to use the tamaguna. So now, what happens is, each of these 5 subtle elements gets divided into 2. So this means like this. 1, half, 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 half. Okay? So the first thing that happens is each element, Sato element, gets divided into 2. And the first half gets divided into 4 parts. Okay? Now, each of these parts borrows 1/4 of the others. So, for example, I take 1/4 of air and I put it here. This is 1/4 air. And then I take 1/4 fire and then I put it here. I take 1/4 water and I put it here. 1/4 of earth and I put it here. So in other words, now the space has what? Not only does it have itself, but it also has others also. So in the subtle stage, the space was very selfish. It's like, I want only myself. I don't want other elements. I'm only going to stick with myself. Now, in order to grossify, the space says what? Oh, can I borrow a little bit of you, and you? So now, therefore, the space is 50% space, and the other half is 1/4 of the other elements. And also, the same thing happens to the others. So, in a prior stage, space was 100%. And in the gross elements, what happens? Each of the elements are only 50% of themselves, and then the others are 1/4 of each others. So what happens is now we went from the subtle 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Space was just space. Air was just air. Fire was just fire. Water was just water. Earth was just earth. And in order to go from subtle to gross, this happens. This formula happens. Okay, now this formula is what we call panchikarana, the conversion from subtle to gross. Okay? And that's what we can see in the chart here. Exactly the same. Now, verse 27. How the subtle elements become gross. Panchikarana formula. Each element is divided into 2 equal halves. Done. A 1/2 is then divided into 4 equal parts. 4 equal parts. Done. Then to the first half of... Okay, we don't need to read the rest. You get the idea. Yeah, you get the idea. Okay. And this is also saying the properties. The property of space is sound, of air is touch, of form. So for all of these to detect, for example, form, I need eyes. Okay, and so on.
And that's true, because for taste, you have to have not just the water, because water in itself is tasteless.
Yeah.
It's got to then take on the other elements to come together.
Yeah, and also water, because, see, if you think about a tongue, for example, whatever you can taste it's got moisture in it. Mm. Try tasting like a dry wall.
We can't taste space.
Well, you have to have saliva on your tongue to even start the taste process.
Exactly, right. So saliva, tongue, water, there you go. So there's a connection. Okay, basic commentaries. The division of the elements account for the diversity of objects. The division of the elements is what accounts for so many objects in this world. All gross objects are alloys. What's an alloy?
Mixture of metals.
Mixture of metals.
Two metals. Mixture, yeah. Or minerals.
Metal,
you could say minerals, you could say
okay.
minerals.
It could be metals.
Oh, so it's combining.
Yeah,
okay,
combining,
so it's like combining
a
together.
mixture, yeah.
Okay. The names are based on the dominant portions in the mixture. Sounds like we don't need this piece of information. Subtle elements stand alone. As I said, they're selfish. I'm just using an analogy. Only the tamasic part of the subtle elements grossify, we explained. Rajas and sattva are used for the subtle body, we've already explained before. Tamas is used for the gross body of the entire world. Okay, now more commentaries by Ramakrishna's text. In the process of evolution, up to what they call the subtle stage, we are concerned with the diversification of chit, consciousness, because everything is in the world consciousness. Chit as the witness, and chit also as the apparent subjects, the apparent individual knowers. And chit also as the apparent objects. That means consciousness as the witness, consciousness as the subject, consciousness as the objects in the world. Due to Maya, or will, which is the first mode of chit. Okay. So in other words, what it's saying is only to Maya, or the will of God. You know how they say, and he desired the world, and so the world came. So only to the will, or Maya, one and the same thing, because Maya is all knowledge. Then we have the witness, the subjects, and the objects. Now the task is how to convert this ideal, the subtle thought, into the material as we experience all derivatives of matter. According to Vedanta, there is only chit, consciousness. Intelligence, being its subtle manifestation, Maya or Shuddha Prakriti or pure Sattva, and matter, its gross manifestation, Ashuddha Prakriti or Sattva contaminated by Rajas and Tamas. So even knowledge and matter is also a manifestation of the one consciousness. Because you cannot now say consciousness is knowledge. You cannot put an attribute of knowledge onto consciousness. Consciousness is only awareing the knowledge only to its nature, which is to make everything aware. Panchikarana is a method and process of the subtle matter to transform itself into gross matter. We understand that. And also it is a dogmatic statement that can neither be proven nor disproven, at least without present knowledge. Because you say, how do we know this? Where do we get this? Can we? Who was there observing this process and writing down what exactly happens? The point is the jiva hasn't even been created now. So at some things we simply cannot prove. We can only take by the word of the Shastra, the word of what is being revealed to these sattvic minds that's been given to the rishis. It's a good point worth mentioning. So you don't have to now go, wow, that's how it happened. Just take it as, it's interesting. What's next? Grossification of five great elements has been accomplished so far. Now we have the world has been created only to the Panchikarana. Next step is to create the objects of enjoyment, the Jagat, and the gross body, the Sthula Sharira. See, so far we haven't talked about the world. We only talked about how the subtle elements convert to gross elements. We've talked nothing about the world, the Jagat, or the actual gross body of the person. Okay, verse 28. 14 worlds are about to be created. From these 5 grossified elements on the board are born the Brahmanda, and from it evolved all the 14 worlds. The objects of experience, everything that we see, which is nothing but what makes up the world, because the world is nothing but objects, in which the experience takes place. When Hiranyagarbha, that is the total mind, identifies with the totality of all individual gross bodies, it is known as a new term, Vaishwanara. This term will be used again. So, Hiranyagarbha is what? Total mind. When this total mind identifies with all of the bodies in the entire universe, in all 14 worlds, then that gets a new name called Vaishvanara. Whereas, when Taijasa, what is it Taijasa? Jiva identified with the subtle body. When that one identifies with the individual gross body, that is of animals, or of men, women, or of gods, devas, like celestial beings, it is known as Vishwas. Vishwas just means that which is varied. Why that which is varied? Because look how many varied forms there are. Insects, animals, humans, women, all types of people, all types of colors. Therefore, Vishwas is when Taijasa identifies with the gross body. So therefore, we got Prajna, or we're just going to say Taijasa. Taijasa, that's the subtle body. And then when it identifies with the gross body, we call it Vishva or Vishvas, it depends on the Santi. Okay, so that's just a new name. So this is gross body identification. Now commentaries. The cosmic egg, Brahmanda, means that the material creation appears in an elliptical shape. Now the first thing I'm going to say is, what do you mean by this? And in the Hindu tradition, if you look up, the significance of the egg, why creation looks like an egg, you can read that by yourself. I'm not going to go through certain things because then we're going to be here forever. That's why I put a hyperlink there. It is born out of a black hole, quote, black hole, just to give you some reference point. Okay, what is born out of a black hole? Brahmanda, 14 worlds, or macrocosmic Tama Guna, which is the densest matter. In it are 14 fields of experience, 14 worlds. So order. Brahmanda is referring to that out of which the 14 worlds are created. And Brahmanda means cosmic egg, literally. What cosmic egg means, you can look that up yourself. 14 worlds are inhabited by 3 types of sentient beings. That means Vishwas. So when you think of Vishwas, just think of what? Sentient beings, something that's alive. That means also animals, insects, microbes, and so on. The lower worlds of these 14 are inhabited by animals, or animal Vishwas. Also, these animals represent not only physical animals, but also, what is an animal? Very procreational, survival-ish, right? He wants to eat, he wants to survive. It's very lower, on the lower aspect of creation. Therefore, animals can also refer to a human being which is identified highly with procreation, grossified pleasures, just living for the sake of, extracting and keeping the physical body feeling good. Okay. The upper worlds, so we talked about the lower worlds. Remember, there's 14 worlds. Upper 7, lower 7. We're in the center. The lower 7 is what we call, some religions will call it hells. But I don't think now hell like fire and all that. Just simply means unpleasant or very limited in what it can give us. So the lower it goes, the more densified or farther away is the Vishwa from what? From the subtlest of the subtlest. That's why in Brahma Loka or Satya Loka, it is the subtlest Loka or closest to Brahman. Yeah, you can only say closest, it's a very weird language, but just to give you some perspective. So the lower we go, the denser everything gets. The higher we go, the more lighter. That's why celestial beings are in the upper 7 And these lizards as portrayed in some cultures, like these funny people and all sorts of animals, heads and all this. There's a reason for this. All of this is a representation of these lower worlds. Just like we have archangels or celestial beings presented, we also have these demons also presented. So this tells us the variances contained throughout these 14 lokas, which is what Brahmanda is talking about. Now you're going to say, why do we have 14? Like, why do we have like such a big range of worlds? And the answer is coming. The upper worlds are inhabited by celestial beings, or celestial vishwas, or devas, with much punya. That is punya karma. Now, what makes a punya karmish person? The mind is highly sattvic. And the middle worlds are inhabited by human vishwas. Not just the middle world, but also you can even say the middle, maybe like this section, we don't know, but it's the middle worlds. Who have some merit, punya, and some demerit, papa. So in other words, all of us are on earth because we have done some good stuff and we have done some fishy, shaky stuff in the background. Right? And that qualifies us for this earth. So a secret, don't worry.
You should be next to me.
Punya papa ratio depends on sattvic purity of the subtle body. So what makes a person holy? Or what makes their aura, their sense of energy very pure? The mind. What makes a person when you come near them and there's some shakiness, some darkness there. You know how we don't know why we speak this language, but there's something dark about this person because there's a lot of tamaguna. So it all depends on what ratio of sattva, rajas, and tamas is contained in the subtle body. Animals are tamasic and do not worry. Why? Because tamaguna is total ignorance, so there's nothing to worry about. And also because they have no intellects. They can't say, I wish I was like that deer over there. Gets more chicks. Right, so they cannot think like this. Celestial devas are sattvic and don't worry. When you're happy, are you worried about liberation?
Yeah.
When we're happy, we're not worried about anything. We're not worried about pluses or minuses. This means staying happy 24/7, ironically, yields no spiritual progress. It just yields what? Samsarish happiness. That's all it does. So therefore, even celestial beings are at a certain level of samsara. So this should right now quit anyone's willingness to be some kind of an archangel or... Because, in the spiritual world, this is a big deal. I want to be someone higher. I don't want to be a human being. It's all heavy here. I want to be like some light celestial being, some good person floating around and blessing everyone. So this is also samsara. It's going to say now, why? Animals can evolve upwards. How? By the exhaustion of their karmas. If there's a roadkill, this is good. Because the animal has exhausted its karma, right? It had to have an unfortunate roadkill in order to move on, to progress.
My previous guru actually told me one time that if an animal gives up its life for a human to eat as consumption, it carries a boon, which gives it forwards evolution.
Okay, that's a possibility, yeah. So when we see animals suffering and all this is only to the exhaustion of their karma, so they can evolve upwards. Because people actually all the time ask, but what about animals who are suffering? It's a very common question.
But likewise, would you say humans, if you're going to progress, you have to work through your karma, which may not always be painless. So that parallel with the animals is probably likely for humans as well. The karmic process. So if we go through a process of trial and difficulty, we're working through karma, but through that process, then it's a purification or the working away of that karma.
Yeah.
So it's just, we just parallel animals in that sense.
Yeah, good point. It's a good point, because all of the suffering, what they say, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So that's the idea. What doesn't kill you actually purifies you. In fact, I met some very strong people, like they're very strong, in their character. And if you listen to their story, they've gone through a lot of suffering in life. They lost someone close to them, their child died, or they lost a parent when they were young, but there's something very strong about them. So this is the idea. Okay. Now, celestial devas are super happy, they're exhilarated, they're all in ecstasy, and so thus they don't worry. And since they are born from good karma. Animals can evolve upwards. Celestials will become human jivas, fortunately or unfortunately, depends how you look at that, when the momentum of good karma exhausts and brings them back to earth, samsara. So celestial being is like a rocket flying upstairs into this beautiful world. But every rocket is going to have its fuel exhausted. And when it does, it's going to come back crashing from whence it came. Therefore, there is no escape from Earth. There's no way we can escape from here. It has to be done properly, this process of ridding ourselves from what we are not. We cannot look for something else and think that's going to be the end of it. Humans can evolve upwards or downwards depending on merit and demerit of their actions. So right now, we can go out and we have choice. I can either do action which devolves me, or I can do action which evolves me. It's all up to the human being. That's our privilege. Now the creation is complete. Creation is, therefore, living beings, matter, and consciousness. Jiva, living beings, Jagat, matter, Ishvara, consciousness. Text has established the context in which the individual humans exist. It shows we are part of a conscious creation. In other words, we're not just put here randomly. This is not a random creation that somehow, by random luck, it came to be like it is. As a scientist will usually present this idea. So there's sometimes a conflict when you come to Vedanta from a science world. Then there's a lot of apparent differences. In other words, a conscious creation does not create by accident. An intelligent, all-knowledge creation doesn't just suddenly get bored and go, I want to create something. It is intelligence. Therefore, we are here on the basis of all knowledge. Summary. Context of creation. In the context of creation, this is the further fall of Ishvara down to the total gross body level. So what we're seeing is how the fall happens. They speak of the fall in different religions. So the fall in this case, we're analyzing how from the subtle elements, we take the tamaguna, we create the gross elements, and then further we went all the way from the subtlest, which is pure sattva guna, which is Maya, the Shuddha Prakriti, and then through a process we came to the fall of identifying with very heavy, gross physical body.
So it repeats itself when we actually leave the gross body. We also go back to all that stage, isn't it?
No, when we leave the gross...
The subtle body...
In the context of moksha or in the context of death?
Death.
In the context of death, then you just leave the gross body.
But the causal body?
The causal body and the subtle body get simply transmigrated to a new physical body in order to continue the karmas that are yet to be exhausted.
But there's a space, space in between space and time?
Yeah, but that's not the case. There's no traveling. We use the word traveling, but there is no actual traveling to some dimension.
Space and time is a human construct.
Yeah, because we use space and time only to our series of continuity from like all that happens is this. You see, but because there was a sequence, it makes you appear like there's time. So this time is non-existent on the relative scale. On the absolute scale, but relatively it makes us appear.
I was interested. Remember last Tuesday we were talking after the session. He was talking about karma, and I think most people have got this idea of a lineal aspect of karma.
Yeah.
Whereas you've really got to think of it almost as a three-dimensional aspect, because it's
or infinite dimensions.
yeah, infinitely three-dimensional. But that also makes you then go back inwards to the point of the causal point.
Okay, what's next? Now what happens to the jiva? Now we discover what happens to this person, the jiva, at the individual gross body level. Okay, we describe jiva's samsara. Now that the jiva has been created and is privileged to a physical body, let's see how the jiva suffers. The taijasa, the subtle body, is further fallen to the state of Vishwa. What this means is a waking state jiva entity. So what is Vishwa? We're all Vishwas now. Why? Because we're all waking state. While identified with the individual gross body, such as celestials, animals, and human bodies. They, by nature, that means these Vishwas, are extrovert and devoid of the knowledge of their essential nature. Therefore, they perform action for results they believe will make them happy. They enjoy performing action. So this is describing the condition of the jiva. After having gained and gone through this process of creation and finally been given a physical body, what does it do? It is, number one, extrovert by nature. What is a jiva? Object-oriented extrovert. That's all we do in our life. We look towards things, talk, we discuss things, we discuss the world. All day we're doing just this, discussing objects. So first thing is extrovert. Second is the jiva is devoid of self-knowledge, of their nature as limitless. For this reason, owing to this ignorance, what happens? Answer is, they perform action. In other words, they can't stand being ignorant of their essential nature, and to escape my pain of not knowing who I am, what do? I perform actions for the results of feeling good, because I believe it will make me happy. I believe it will give me what? Something that represents fullness. That's what happiness does in this life. When we get something, we feel what? Temporarily full.
Complete.
Yeah, but it doesn't last. But it doesn't matter that it doesn't last. It still represents what? Fullness. So in order to get a glimpse of who I am, what do? Owing to my extroverted nature, the only way a jiva can do that is by doing some action in the world, getting in the car, wasting human resources and earth resources because they have to dig up coal and petrol. So this is how commercialism works. This is how the world works. I constantly am extroverted to what? Chase stuff in order to temporarily feel happy, because I cannot stand being ignorant of my nature. Therefore, what do they do also? They continue performing action. Because if one action has provided happiness, what kind of a person would stop doing that? Right? What do? You do another hit until it becomes boring. And then I find another novelty to continue getting another hit of happiness. So this is the life, the samsara of a jiva. Commentary. The tragedy of life begins when Rajas enters the picture. Human Vishwas, that is the waking state jivas, feel insecure. So first point, human beings generally feel insecure. They look outwards into the changing world for seeking happiness. They should instead look inwards towards the still, silent awareness. They do actions to enjoy results. When an action removes an anxiety, that means a sense of limitation, they feel good. So they do even more actions. They go and buy another product, waste more petrol, produce more noise pollution, right? Annoy more people, only for what? to get another hit for my own enjoyment. Consequently, they get many experiences which lead to many births. Do you know about this phenomena called the bucket list?
Yeah.
You know, do as many things in your life. Life is about what? Experience. When you die, you're not going to be wondering about the fights. You're going to be what? Remembering all of the loving experiences you've done. So therefore, life is about experiencing the best experience that you can have. This is the New Age basic.
It used to be things before, and that's translated now to experience.
Yeah. Like life is all about emotion. Huh? Where there's emotion, there's motion. Therefore, move. Be in the world. Do something, because moving and doing and dancing and enjoying and singing and doing this and that equals what? A lot of emotion. And that is what life is all about. Therefore, the entire world is on the basis of this one single idea. Experience more in order to enjoy more. And this produces constant repetitive commercialism that we see in this world. New products, new experiences, left and right.
Yeah, but the Jnani does the same thing, but with a different perspective.
Yeah.
Well, Jnani wouldn't have the need to do that in the first place. Because if one's full, then what am I going to gain out of doing something?
But it doesn't mean a Jnani would never have an experience, though.
Yeah, Jnani still has an experience. You see, when you're happy, suppose that you really want something and you get it in that moment. Do you need anything in that moment? Absolutely. Like the idea of I need more of this, that doesn't even arise. Therefore, a Jnani doesn't think in a way that I want to experience more because I'm already I am the truth of the entire universe. But a Jnani doesn't say that, of course. But that's an understanding. So therefore, Jnani has no need. In fact, they say the wisest person is the one whom nobody knows about. They're the ones behind closed doors. They don't disturb anyone, nor are they disturbed by anyone. Why? Because they're not out there in the world. Who is in the world? An extroverted mind, an agitated mind, a mind looking for happiness from objects. A Jnani owning to the full ascertained nature of self has no need to be in the world. Because how is the world over there better than over here if I'm also over there? Like space. Space in China is exactly the space as in right here. So how am I going to get better space in China than what I already have right here? A Jnani has ascertained the nature of the self is all-pervading. That removes the motivation for experiences. Jiva's trajectory is not orderly, but zigzags. As Martin was pointing out, it's not linear. From one experience to another, because their destiny is surrendered to ever-changing likes and dislikes. In other words, we fly left and right because we are bound to our own likes and dislikes. If you don't have any likes for anything, are you going to be in the world? If you don't have dislikes for anything, are you ever going to be agitated? No. So therefore, likes and dislikes, or surrendering to those likes, identifying with likes and dislikes, is what makes the world as we see today. What makes the world a world of commercialism. They feel helpless like worms and are always in need of help. This is strong language used intentionally. In fact, Shankara is going to use even stronger language, which I will show. Commentaries. It was seen earlier that when prajna, that means the jiva identified with the causal body, becomes identified with the individual subtle body, he or she is called taijasa. So, prajna, jiva equals identified with causal body, taijasa, jiva equals identified with subtle body. When taijasa becomes identified with different individual gross bodies, such as the devas, the celestials, the animals, human beings, it is called Vishwa. So, prajna, taijasa, Vishwa. Again, prajna, jiva is identified with what? Causal body. When that prajna identifies with the subtle body, it gains a new name called Taijasa Jiva. When that Taijasa Jiva identifies with the physical gross body, it is called Vishwa. Okay, it says there too. So Jivas, plural, becomes many individual bodies who come to be called Vishwa. Now, what is the quality of the Vishwa? By their nature, the Jivas are extroverts and have no knowledge about their own essential nature because they are too preoccupied with the gross body. I want to look more beautiful, thinner, stronger, one more ab, one less freckle, all day long trying to improve the body. Also the mind. The mind is not excluded from the gross. The sense organs, they're also occupied with their sense organs. What does this mean? I always want to expose my eyes towards click, 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 right? Like things to see, things to enjoy, beautiful music. So loud music is what? That's agitating for the neighbors. Is what? About exposing my ears for my own enjoyment. And they are preoccupied with this. And the objects of the world and the interactions with the objects of the world. So this is describing the situation of the jiva. Constant preoccupation with the physical world. That's all a jiva is. There is no possibility of Satchidananda Swarupa Jnanam. There is no way of knowing about my limitless nature. Why? Because there's only one other option. I'm occupied with limited objects. So what does this mean? Can your mind focus on two things at the same time?
Not focused.
100% focus. No way. So it either focuses towards this or this. A or B. B is limitless. B is, it's half. And this is full. Okay, it's full. So this means I either turn my mind towards what is full and complete and whole, none other than Ishvara, or I turn my mind on partiality, on halfness, on incompletion, on limitation. We do not know our essential nature, then we are a jiva. So what is a jiva? One who doesn't know that I am full. Now don't philosophize and say, who is this I that is full? Because to say that I am full obviously means that I'm other than the fullness that I speak of. When we come to know our essential nature, we are not only not jiva, but there is no one called the jiva. Everything is Paramatma and His glory. Therefore, I can only call you a jiva if I am ignorant. If I identify myself as a jiva, the body, mind, intellect, only then I say, oh, look at these ignorant jivas. If a person who has completely ascertained themselves to be the truth of the entire universe cannot say that to another person, because they only see what? The truth everywhere. It's like this. Not to make it so mystical. Suppose someone is acting foolish. What do we say? We judge them, right? It's a foolish person. Okay? Why do we say that? Because we see them from a certain perspective. Now, what happens if I gave you a microscope and all you saw was atoms? Could you still say foolish? What a foolish person? No. What are you seeing? You're seeing nothing but matter. So in the same way, only to the ascertained knowledge that all of this is nothing but appearance, there is no need to label or judge appearances, because they're just appearances.
But now, what you're seeing in that example is matter creating karma. And it's when you're trying to criticize that, you're actually criticizing your mental projection of what that karma is going to be.
You're criticizing your mental idea of my own. I do not understand my own. I have not apprehended what I'm looking at, because I'm not looking at something within myself. Now, what's next? A break is next in 5 minutes. Okay, what's next? What is the life story of this jiva who has so externalized his or her vision that one is unable to see a state of self-knowledge within himself? Now we're going to talk about a beautiful story of this jiva and how this jiva finally comes to find the acharya and be saved from this samsara. That's going to come up okay, we're doing good. Actually,
Wow.
we're not doing so good, but what's coming up is very interesting because two things are coming up. How jiva is finally saved, and two, we're going to begin Pancha Kosha Viveka, actually how to negate who we are not. And that's all covered. So let's waste no time. Break 5 minutes. Now, verse 30. The jiva is compared to a worm. Literally. Okay, so we're now going to speak about what's the condition of the jiva. The jiva engages himself in action for getting enjoyments and does action again for enjoyment. They soon after get lost in the rebirth from one birth to the other. Like the insect worm falling into a river is swept from one whirlpool to another and never attains peace in samsara's restless currents, nor attains liberation. So, a worm that falls into a strong current of a river has no chance of saving itself, because it is tossed from wherever the current happens to go. So the jiva, in the same way, having come to earth and forgotten its nature, losing its direction thus, and subscribing to temporary limited experiences, only to its likes and dislikes, it is as though, like a worm in a river, constantly going wherever the flow of ignorance or the general ignorance of the world happens to be going. So that's the jiva. That's why it takes so many lifetimes for liberation. Now, commentaries. The jiva performs action for the sake of enjoyment. Anyone disagree with that?
No.
Why do we do actions? Just for the sake of doing actions?
To make us feel better.
Yeah, so we can benefit somehow. So that's why we do actions, for enjoyment. Then, because of the karma, owing to the actions that are put out into the field, one suffers or enjoys again and again. So if I put out an action into the field and I suffer, then in order to stop suffering, I have to put up another action into the field. But that another action into the field is going to create more consequences down the road of enjoyment of suffering, which I then have to put another action into the field in order to continue dealing with that. So the cycle goes on. In this way, the jiva migrates from one life to another in an endless cycle of birth and death. There is no redemption for such a jiva. More commentaries. Birth is identification with a desire or fear. That's what birth means. Whenever we are born in what? Okay, why do we find ourselves in a world of certain... Why are we born in a nightclub? You know, what I mean is like, you know, we're going through the world, right? So we get born in a nightclub, we get born in a disco, we get born in like an entertainment park, we get born in front of a computer, we get born in a kitchen. Why are we born in certain places? Because of the desire causing me to be, for my reality to be that reality. So only to my likes and dislikes, they constantly cause Atman to be as though born in an environment that symbolizes, that correlates with that like or dislike. Okay. And death is non-attachment to a fear or a desire. Okay. Why do we stop suddenly doing something? One day we were, so into it, so onto that, and then suddenly we lose interest. Why? What happened? What happened before and after? Yesterday I was so hooked, and now I couldn't care less. What happened? My attachment got dropped. My relevance, what that means for me, is negated. My interpretation of its value has been removed. I am now no longer attached to what I was, therefore I die to that object. I no longer am interested in that object. So therefore death is constant non-attachment and birth is constant clinging. So to be born as a baby, what does this mean? I am clinging onto the world. I am giving reality to this world. Okay? Belief, continuing, belief that an individual jiva transmigrates, moves from one body to the other, and appears as the same entity in the next birth is ignorance. The karma that brings an individual jiva into being survives the death of the body, the samskaras survive, the causal body, and generates a different body. The individuality in the succeeding birth, in the next birth after death, is different from the individuality in the last birth. Why? Because individual just represents the kind of environment you're born in, your personality. Born with different parents, they obviously are going to be a different person than the last birth.
You're on the opposite side of the world in a different language.
Yeah, different language, you got a good point. But although it is still a jiva. And also it said here, believe that an individual jiva appears as the same entity in the next birth is ignorance. Yeah, it is ignorance. Because what happens is the jiva simply becomes different. It's still a jiva, but it gains a different environment owing to continuity of its karma. Yeah. So therefore, there is no such thing as you're the same old person, and you were not an animal. You were also a human being in the land. There's no such thing as that. Our karma has changed. Therefore, we have gained a completely different environment.
It kind of clarifies that statement that you choose your own parents or you choose your own place of birth, because it's actually your karma that's dictating that, and that's it kind of is a choice because you made the karma. Isn't it?
Yeah. Or in other words, be careful what you wish for.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, what's next? How jiva gets finally saved from limitations of samsara. So far we've spoken about the process of creation and the jiva finding him or herself in this world. And now, after lifetimes of struggle, of chasing limited objects, what happens is eventually the jiva now gets saved somehow. Let's see how. Verse 31. The jiva is pulled out of samsara by God's grace, owing to past punya karma. Okay, so that's the secret, punya karma. How do you get punya karma? Following dharma, where do you find dharmic injunctions, principles? None other than the Shastra. All religions, by the way, all teach, number one, dharma. No religion is going to say, go and kill others who do not believe in our religion. And if you think this is the case, who believe in a different religion.
Not from the scriptures.
And if we think that this is the case, then this is not what a religion is saying. This is what an ignorant mind is interpreting. We sometimes think that Islam is the most violent religion in the world. It's not. It's only an ignorant mind that takes these statements and then converts them into this strong sense of dualistic opposition. But in essence, all religions are pure and they all teach the same dharma. Do not hurt, do not injure, learn compassion, learn kindness, and generally be a good person, an example that others would be, very happy to follow. Verse 31. when their good deeds, punya karma, bear fruit or results, then like worms, they enjoy temporary rest, as if they had been removed from the river by a compassionate person and set on the shore. They rest because they feel happy when they get what they want. In other words, the worm who has been struggling to get out of the strong current, can it save itself? Can it pull itself out of the current onto the shore? Impossible. It needs help of a compassionate person, being a symbol of God's grace. And how does it get pulled out of the its trajectory of its flow? Punya karma. Therefore, what's going to pull me out of the river of samsara? Punya karma. Therefore, in order for punya karma leads to what? Dharma. Dharma leads to moksha. Therefore, moksha I can only arrive to if I am a good dharmic person. I follow injunctions. I do not compromise. I do not cut corners. I do not cheat, lie, or make excuses in the name of my own self-satisfaction. I am a good person. I do whatever is possible to remain like that without compromising. Because what happens sometimes is we quack on these dharmic principles, but when we're seduced by an environment, we suddenly make an exception. It's okay. And then we justify, even because that's the intellect always justifies why what you did is okay. That's how buying happens. I buy on the basis of irresponsible emotions, and then my intellect steps in and says, you needed this phone because it's got more megapixels. And I'm happy now. So therefore, the compassionate person now saves the worm from its struggle, and it's saved because of punya karma. Commentaries. What is the cause for the worm being lifted from the current of samsara river? Owing to some punya karma done somewhere at some time in the past which we're unable to remember, a compassionate man, a compassionate person, a woman, chanced to be there at that moment to rescue the worm. This is called God's grace. In other words, there's no such thing as accidents. A person doesn't get saved because it's accidental. We usually in our life find ourselves in the right place at the right time, and then looking back, we say, if I was late just 5 minutes, I would have never had that experience, which resulted in one of the best life transformations that I can remember. This is called God's grace. Right time, right place. What's more, in the same way, when a saint or sage comes into the life of a spiritual seeker, of a spiritual worm, there is no logic for why or how it happened. We can't explain how or why. Why did I meet them? How I met them? What caused me to meet them? I cannot explain. It is totally random. But the fact is, only to looking back to the amount of work that has been going on by my involvement with that object, I can see that it was, the greatest thing. So this is called Ishwara's grace. And also the verse is indirectly saying, every little step in one's spiritual path is by Ishwara's grace and not by one's effort alone. Now, suppose a worm gets saved from the river. Some worms say, yeah, I did it. I saved myself. This is still an unqualified worm. Once that worm is on the shore, they're going to get a temporary break. But only to that temporary break, they're going to go back into the interesting life of samsara. Whereas the worm that gets saved and says, I'm not the only one who played a part in this. The whole very much contributed to me being where I am today. That one stays on the shore long enough until they're able to attain liberation. Now, how to get Ishwara's grace? Humility and surrender alone help in spiritual unfoldment. 3 qualities are essential in a spiritual seeker and rare to find all 3 together. First one is the ability to live like a human being, but nobly. That means wisely, a noble human being. As I said before, no compromises, no matter how enticing the offer is. 2, a sense of urgency to go beyond limitations. This is mumukshutvam, as you heard, desire for liberation. Now, this mumukshutvam, desire for liberation, for that to be true, for that to be fulfilled, I also need to have the ability to surrender at the feet of saints and sages. So even if one is saved on the shore, the ego for some is so strong that they do not have the ability yet to say, I am weak, I can't do this by myself, I need help. The ego is still strong, trying to appear as though I can indeed do this on my own because I am smart. I'm a business owner, I am this, I've got experience. And therefore, owning to that era right there, even if I'm saved by a compassionate whoever it is, owning to Ishvara's grace, it doesn't stop there. I need to further surrender at the feet of those who are willing to take me even further. Now, what's next? When by the Lord's grace, the seeker realizes the importance of saints and sages in his or her spiritual progress, he or she approaches the teacher for guidance. In fact, we're talking about the journey of every single person on earth that we can all relate to. Struggling, and suddenly we start to sort of, I need some help. Well, actually, I don't need some help. Right? You know, kind of like bouncing back and forth. I don't want to admit that I am stupid. I don't want to admit that I am a fool. So we're kind of admitting, but we're not admitting. It's like, you know, speaking funny, so we don't give away our ignorance. And then eventually, more and more, we're more direct. I don't know. Help me. Right? So this takes time. Now, verse 32. How Jiva can be saved? So we're going to speak, how is this worm further taken? Actually, we'll stop using the word worm at this point. The Jiva is now going to go forward. How is that? We'll read the verse. The Jiva, finding oneself in whirlpool of samsara, having got instruction from Acharya, and who has realized Brahman. So this means Acharya and who has realized Brahman are two different components here. They're not one and the same. By the process of discrimination of the 5 sheets, one attains supreme liberation, moksha. So this is the first instruction how moksha is to be attained. First of all, Acharya is met. After the Acharya has been met, a realized Acharya comes who completes the progress for the spiritual seeker. How? Through the process of discriminating, negating 5 layers which I am not. Thus what remains is what I am. Commentaries. The spiritual student, by the grace of Lord, approaches the teacher for receiving Upadesham, which means that which takes us nearest to ourselves is Upadesham. So Upadesham is someone, a tool, a person who helps us come closest to that which we are. Okay, because the mind at this point is very far from the self. And now what does an Upadesham do? Brings them close. To whom does he go for Upadesha? He or she goes first to the Acharya and then to Siddha Purusha. Siddha means accomplished, one who has realized the self. Thus, there are 2 clear stages in the spiritual path. The first stage is where the student is full of questions and wants to understand. That's the first stage. That's how we all go through life. I want to know what life is all about. who, what is this secret of living? What is happiness? So very kind of like a research person. They're looking at the field for the answers. To that person who is looking in the field for general answers, who is not yet serious about liberation, nor does liberation mean anything to them, to that one, the teacher is the acharya who helps the student in studying the scriptural statements and arguments only to reach that point of understanding where it is clear that the truth cannot be grasped by intellectual ability. So therefore, we have established so far, the acharya is a type who, because acharya has many names, in this case, acharya is a general person to show you, provide some logic, provide some reason how I cannot ascertain what is prior to the mind. Showing like PowerPoint presentations, showing like scholarly works, right? Very kind of like informative. Here's the data. With the scholarly intellectual teaching of the 5 sheets, knowledge imparted by the acharya, the seeker can put in his or her own efforts and reach only up to a particular limit. So, this means that even if there is an acharya who is not realized, then they will take the seeker up to a certain point, a very far point. Then, by the Lord's grace, a realized Siddha Purusha, that is a Jnani Acharya, comes into his or her life. So, in other words, 2 differences. Acharya, think of an Acharya, just a general person that we meet who says, here's what the truth is. We have a lot of these in the spiritual field. We sort of bounce back and forth between one and the other, and we kind of get tossed left and right. And they all sound fantastic. They all sound really good. And they take us very far. But then there's that one acharya who has not only got the teaching, but also has ascertained what is being taught. They're embodying what is being taught. That one, once that one shows up, that is stage 2. That one finishes the journey for the jiva. What's next? Verse 33 to 48 begin the systematic unfolding, that is Shravana, of the 5 layers of the human personality, which apparently hide awareness, that is original consciousness, which apparently hide the self, Atman. They are called the 5 sheets, koshas. However, something that pervades everything cannot be covered. You understand that statement? Something that pervades everything cannot be covered. Because if it pervades everything, obviously the obstruction has not obstructed it. It's obviously being also pervaded by it. There is nothing bigger or beyond awareness to cover it. Because reality is non-dual awareness alone. For example, if you're asking, objects do not conceal space. Because space provides them, pervades them, even though objects exist in space. Okay. Object. Is this now taking up the space? Is this occupying the space? Now, why are you shaking your head when this can happen? Is it still occupying the space?
Yes, because it still exists.
Yeah, but is it occupying the space, from the point of just here? Don't limit the example now and say.
Oh, okay.
So then why are we saying it's occupying the space now when the reality is now it's not occupying the space? And even if you do say, yeah, but it's occupying it over there, well then can you still say that if I move it over here?
It's in space. But
it's occupying here, but what if I move it here? Well, it's still occupying.
Change.
Yeah. So in other words, space is always free of the object. So if can you find a place where I put this in space and then you cannot remove this from space? Like, you know, it's like concreted in space. Is that how space is? No. In other words, whenever we modify a thought, space is free. But it seems like while the thought is there, it seems like space is occupied by that thought. But in reality, the fact that new thoughts can come and replace this thought, and then a new thought comes and replaces this thought, means what? I was never occupied by, I was never bound to this thought, I was never bound by this thought, nor was I ever bound by this thought. The fact that all thoughts are changing means what? You, consciousness, are free of all thoughts. Therefore, that which pervades everything cannot be covered. Space pervades the pen. That's why the pen exists, because the pen needs space in order for it to be held, in order for it to be, observed. Something that pervades everything cannot be covered. How do we do that? Just by showing you the example. When you move the pen, it is now free. Therefore, space was never covered. In other words, you're never covered by what? Ignorance. That means what? You're already free. For example, we've done that. Now, the covering is just ignorance. The covering koshas merely direct attention to the koshas. So it doesn't go to the self. So what do these coverings do? These 5 sheets. Visual. Okay, they merely direct attention, but do not cover. Okay. Suppose we have Atman in the center. And we're just going to say the 5th kosha, the Annamaya kosha, the physical body. If you go like this, right? Like pinch yourself, pinch your body. Is there a pinch? How do you know that? Or because of what do I know that there is a feeling pertinent to the physical body? Because of that which makes this kosha aware, makes this kosha conscious. So this means anything that happens to the physical body, sick or well, or tall or dark or light, we always know that. Why do we always know everything about our physical body? Because Atman pervades it. Why do we always know everything about our prana? Like, I'm hungry. When you're hungry, do you know you're hungry? Yeah, how do you know that? Yeah, because Atma also pervades it. When you're feeling an emotion about someone or something, there's knowledge of that. That's all we speak about. I feel this, I feel that. That's all we speak about all day. How do we know that? Because the knower, the aware, the consciousness is also pervading the manomaya kosha. When there is a thought, oh, I have a good idea. That's vijnanamaya kosha. Why do we say, let me share my idea with you? Why do we say that? Because Atman is also pervading the vijnanamaya, the thoughts. Therefore, we then verbalize those thoughts through our karma indriya, called speech. And then why do we feel bliss? Why do we feel happy? Because of Anandamaya kosha, which is the source of all happiness. Therefore, we say, oh, I feel so happy today. Therefore, why do we say that? How do we know that there's happiness? Because Atman pervades that happiness. So even though it seems like Atman is covered, the mere fact that I constantly talk about attributes about my physical body all day long, talk about attributes about your hunger, about digestion, about circulation, we talk about our feelings, we talk about our thoughts, and we talk about how happy we are. The mere fact that we do that all day long means what? We are actually not covered by what we are talking about. We are not covered by Annamaya kosha, Pranamaya kosha, Manomaya kosha, Vijnanamaya kosha, nor Anandamaya kosha. Just the mere fact that we know things pertinent to various personalities of the physical, the prana, the feelings, the thoughts, and the happiness reveals logically, we can come to a conclusion of, we are thus the knower of each of these 5 koshas, thus we are not covered by them. Now, suppose you say, yes, I am covered. You know, I doubt that. Where does doubt happen? Manomaya kosha. So what you just did? I knew about the doubt. Therefore, Atman pervaded the doubt. You know, I think you're right. What is that? A thought. Belongs to where? Vijnanamaya kosha. Why did you say, I think you're right? You know, this sounds good. Why did you say that? Because the intellect has concluded on the basis of its listening that it makes sense. But why are you sharing that thought with me? Because Atman pervades that thought. Oh, I think I feel sick today. Why did you tell me that? Because you are always pervading your body. For example, when you watch a movie, you are constantly looking at the screen. Right now, you're looking at the screen. Movie. Constantly looking at the screen. But you don't notice it. See, when you're looking at now we're reading, we're not noticing the wall, are we? Because we are distracted by the events happening on it. This is life. Wow. Let me talk about my experience. And only to that movement, a distracted life, the more movement there is in life, the harder it is to what? Ascertain that I am the knower, because of which or in whose presence the movement is constantly aware by or known to. So this is the importance of having a silent, peaceful life also. It's also part of the sadhana. If I'm constantly in entertainment, you know, doing a lot of different things, passion all day long, then my life is like this. And that makes it very hard to learn this or ascertain this teaching. So this person has to go inward slowly. Mm-hmm. The purpose of this teaching is to focus the attention on the self. That's it. So this is the practical part. Now, why are we doing this? Why are we here? In order to focus attention on who you actually are. Now, when I say focus attention, what exactly is focusing the attention? Is Atman focusing the attention?
No.
What's doing the attention focusing?
We are.
Yeah, what specifically? Which
The intellect.
Yeah, the intellect. So in other words, we're telling the intellect to redirect its focus, because the intellect is the one in whom, you know, who has the ahamkara. So the ahamkara, the ego, is the intellect. So we're telling the intellect, hey, don't focus on different traits of these personalities. Focus on the very knower, because of which you know the attributes of these other personalities. So we're simply redirecting the focus. Okay, now these introductory verses are meant to provide us this teaching. The koshas will be discussed very soon. Now, verse 33. The 5 koshas are named. That means generally. The food, annamaya kosha, vital air, pranamaya kosha, mind, manomaya, intellect, vijnanamaya, and bliss anandamaya kosha, are the 5 sheets covered by them, apparently covered by them. The Atma forgets its own essential nature. Thus is subjected to cycle of birth and death. In other words, reincarnation owing to unresolved avidya in the past life. Okay, commentaries. Why are they called koshas? Because pure Satchit Ananda, Swarupam Atma, that means the pure self, whose nature is Satchit Ananda, as if, or is as if covered by them. That's why they're called coverings. As though covered by them. This, quote, covering, has a very special meaning in this context. In normal usage, the covering is larger than what is covered. Okay, so you want to cover your car. In order to cover the car, I need to have a bigger cover. That's normal usage of covering, right? So the covering has to be bigger than the covered. However, Here, the object covered Atman is bigger than the covering. That's why the covering is constantly aware, constantly known to you. As, for example, the presence of the body, quote, covers the space only because of which the body's presence is possible. You see that logic there? Even though body seems like it's covering the space, but it's only seemingly covering the space because space is responsible for the body's covering. Without the space, body cannot seemingly cover anything. So this means by the mere fact of space being there prior to the body, only then can the body apparently cover. Okay, I'll rephrase that.
Very interesting. Yeah.
Okay. I'll read that again. In normal, okay, covering is bigger than the covered. Certainly true. Is the Anamaya Kosha bigger than, is the covering bigger than Atma?
No, it's unlimited.
That's what we're saying. Okay, why is it not bigger than Atma? If it was bigger, then who would be the one to feel when I prick the body? Clear now? Okay. Again, I'll read. Here the object covered is bigger than the covering. Atma is bigger than the 5 sheets. As for example, the presence of the body covers the space because of which the body's presence is possible. Similarly, the 5 koshas are covering, that's why it says covering the Atma, in the sense that it is because of the very Atma that these koshas exist. It is because of the very space that the body exists. It is because of the very Atma that the body exists. And get value and importance. That means, oh, my body's so, this and that, only because of why? Atma. The koshas get their existence because of the Atma Tattva. Just like your body. Suppose I want to put your body inside this little cap. Is that possible?
No.
No, you need you need space. You need space to hold the body. So therefore I need Atman to enjoy the 5 personalities. After the covering have taken charge of the Atma. Okay. After the covering have apparently strangled the Atma, taken charge of the Atma gets identified with them. That means it gets identified with all of these koshas.
The limitation, yeah.
Leading to Jivatma, Bhava. So now what is Jivatma? Jivatma is the one who takes these koshas to be me, the self. But in reality, who is the self? The self is the self. You can't even say I am the self. Because to say I am the self means I am not the self. Because, you won't say that. Water doesn't need to say I am the water. And the one's own essential nature is then forgotten. Therefore, the story of birth and death starts. The release from this vicious cycle can come only if the jiva sheds its identification with the koshas by rejecting them, by negating them, by a process of understanding their nature. So, we will now investigate what is the nature of each of these koshas, because I cannot negate something if I'm not very familiar with that which I'm negating. I need to know about what is it exactly that I'm negating. Only then can I go, oh, okay, so what's being known now is not me. Oh, so what's being felt now is not me. Oh, what's being experienced now is not me. So we have to first have a better understanding of these 5 koshas. First, the food and vital air sheath is covered. That means the most outer, food, annamaya kosha, and vital air, pranamaya kosha. We're talking about the koshas that covers every single individual. So this is relating to the individual that's sitting down and listening now. The gross body, the physical body, made up of the grossified elements is called the annamaya kosha, food sheath. So annamaya means food. Why food?
That's what we're being made up of.
Yeah. So this means your body. So if I look at an attractive person and I go, wow, what happens now? I go, oh, cucumbers, tomatoes, oh, pies, apples. Because that's all they are really. That's every single person in this world is nothing but food from the soil, which came from a farmer or livestock or someone. So right now, instantly we can start to modify our perception. And when we look at people, we look at them as cucumbers. Whatever vegetable or whatever you like them, just temporarily, just to get trained and stop giving so much reality to people. Because our life is nothing but what? Entanglements with people. The pranamaya kosha is result of raja guna, aspect of the subtle body. So we take the raja guna of the subtle body, and then we create pranamaya kosha. So the pranamaya kosha consists of the karma indriya and the 5 pranas. So now we're talking about this pranamaya kosha, the second one, and that consists of your 5 organs of action, like feet, sex organs, hands, speech, and the 5 pranas. Now we will analyze them in more detail. Let's talk about our bodies, our physical bodies. The annamaya kosha is made of the tamasic portion of the 5 subtle elements. In simple English, it is made up of matter, atoms, molecules, particles, quarks. If you want to look at science or Vedanta, it doesn't matter. It's made up of physical stuff. It is the gross body or food sheath created from, sustained by food. In fact, if you think about your body, your mom and dad also were sustained by how? By food. Then in Chandogya Upanishad, chapter 6, we talk about, I think it's chapter 7, chapter 5 or 6, how human being is created. For example, a sperm of a father is what? Nothing but potatoes, cucumbers, and so on. It's nothing but food. So food, where does food come from? Rain. Where does rain come from? Oceans. So, we're talking about sperm here, but now we trace this back to the oceans. Because the oceans fed the food, I ate the food, and then the sperm is used, made out of food, to what? Impregnate more food, called the other gender. So food impregnated food, and it made more food that looks like a human being, because it's infused with the subtle body. So therefore, everything physical in this world, every human being, is just food, basically. You're nothing but food. And then food also dies one day, because it is sustained. See, food itself has a shelf life. You grow a tomato, right? It lasts for a while, and it dies. But since this body is also food, it lasts for a while, and it also dies. Therefore, the body follows the exact same nature of beginning and end, just like the constituents which the body is made of, being food. Therefore, we can now re-contemplate what happens when we're putting makeup and so on food. We're just decorating food all day long. It is inert instrument to house. I tried putting like makeup on cucumbers, think how ridiculous that looks. That's exactly what we're doing. It is an inert instrument, this body we speak of, to house the 10 sense faculties, 5 organs of perception, eyes and so on, to hear the world, to receive the knowledge, and also something to which I can respond back. So there's a two-way interaction there. I need to see in order to respond. So that's all your body is. Just 5 organs of action: arms, legs, speech, and so on. Reproductive organs, that's also an organ of action. And also 5 organs of knowledge. For example, to look outside now and say, oh, nice tree, nice weather, we need what? We need eyes. And that's what? Part of the Annamaya Kosha. So, Annamaya Kosha, we now have a little bit better understanding. We are nothing but food. On the aspect of personality of the body. Now, next Kosha. Pranamaya Kosha. This is made of the Rajasic portion of the 5 subtle elements. Okay. But more importantly, this prana, in combination with karma indriya, that is the 5 organs of action, are the Rajasic part of the subtle body. That's just what I said. And forms the sheath of life, of vital air, of that which gives us sentiency. Because previously we said the body is inert instrument. Now what makes this inert instrument sentient? Prana. That's why when prana leaves, the body is dead officially. And this sheath of life, this prana, is sustained by prana, or the life force. It is action oriented. Because life force needs to interact with the world, to experience the world, to interface with the world. Therefore, it's all about action. The karma indriyas are not physical organs. That means the organs of action. When I say organ of speech, am I talking about the actual mouth?
The organism.
The faculty which makes speaking possible. For example, when we say the faculty of seeing, the organ of seeing, are we talking about the actual eye?
No.
No, we're talking about that faculty in the subtle body because of which seeing through the physical eye is possible. How do we prove this? If a person goes blind, then if you replace the eye, the actual physical organ, eye, then the person can see again. This means despite the physical eye being not working, if I provide an instrument that works exactly like the eye and put it and stitch it back up to the brain, this is actually possible, they put these chips now and you're able to see, then instantly what happens? Seeing is possible. This means what? Faculty of seeing has nothing to do with the actual physical organ. The word prana can be broken down into pra, which means excellence, and an, therefore prana, meaning to prove. So excellence and to prove. The presence of life makes the gross body excel. In other words, the presence of life, the presence of prana, makes the gross body function. And it proves itself that it's functioning how? Because of prana, because it's making it sentient. There are 5 subdivisions of prana. We're still talking about the pranamaya kosha, the second kosha. So this prana, this life force, this which makes sentiency of the physical body, is divided into 5 further pranas. First is respiration. Respiration means inhale, the ability to intake oxygen and to exhale oxygen, which is no longer conducive for this organism called the Annamaya, this food organism called the Annamaya Kosha. So I need a faculty for that. The faculty of excretion. In other words, that faculty which makes excretion of food no longer conducive for the survival and the continuity of this body, that faculty is also there. the faculty for circulation, the faculty which is able to take the nutrients and the air and distribute it all throughout the body. Something to move all of this in an equilibrious throughout the body. Digestion, that faculty which takes food, which is what the body is made of, and is able to extract the nutrients and then able to send it throughout the body for its continued survival. And udana, that means throwing up. When something poisonous that is potentially harmful to the body enters the body, then the body immediately is able to reject it back. So we can see how smart creation is. If nothing else works, then instantly body responds and whoosh, goes back, throws it out. And also udana is responsible for severing the subtle body from the physical body at the time of death. Okay. I will continue next fortnight. So we're just going to put here, make sure we remember. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. I wanted to show you one last thing. You know the worm theory? The Vidyaranya, very graphic detail. So I want to describe how Shankara describes it. Okay. The composition of Adi Shankara graphically describes the sorrows experienced at each stage of life. After 9 months of living a cramped life in the womb, that's how we all started. So imagine that, you know. I came to earth, the first thing, I'm cramped. The child emerges in pain. Now, right here, this should reveal the truth of life. We can stop here. You know why? Okay. You come into the world, you have two choices. Happiness or pain. Now, how does every single baby come into this world? So happy to be here. Or, pain. In other words, what is that?
Pain from the past life.
Yeah, and also to be back here, revealing what? I don't want to be here. So right there, we can now tell that this is not our home. We're not supposed to be here. He or she starts his life crying and does so off and on throughout his or her life, based on the many rejections that we get throughout life. Mommy restricts us ice cream, we cry. From a state of total helplessness is how we come into this world, and dependency as an infant. That means if we got very annoying parents, we have to depend on those annoying parents also, and also vice versa. He grows and then is sent from the security of his home to a school where again he cries and gets bullied by more crying children who are also crying.
Crying teachers.
Then begins the rigorous studies of topics that you don't want to learn about, that you have no relation to. Homework, exams, you know how like some people actually hang themselves because so much pressure because of the exams. When all he or she wants is a little freedom to play. As a youth, furthermore, he is caught up owing to the hormones with the demands of his or her senses, desires, expectations, disappointments, and frustrations. We can all relate to the fact that when we were at some point a teenager, things weren't working out. Burdened with the responsibilities and hard work of adult life, like raising children, finding work, getting fired, or finding a pay raise, he or she, what's more, ages and is introduced to the sogginess flabbiness, of sorrows, of old age.
Is that what it says there?
He just looked at the word
That's
sorrow.
actually
He's out living
Not
here.
adding
version.
extra graphic detail.
Fair enough.
Now, it doesn't stop there, there's more. Loneliness kicks in. Diseases, AIDS, tuberculosis,
Make it more gross.
broken bones, coughing,
Alzheimer's.
unable to breathe,
Dementia.
insecurity, memory loss. You can't even remember your own name anymore, who your mom is. That in itself plagues him or her, and then it doesn't stop there. Then they go through the extreme disappointment of being carried away by death. Does that sound very happy to you?
None. No.
Where do I buy a ticket?
And we chose this.
So we chose to come
Tattoo.
back. So
The
we have
tattoo.
our choice
Exactly,
here.
exactly.
We got options.
Yeah. So it's nice to see because I like how graphic it is. It like really gives you reality, you know. And so it doesn't now mean just start to put out. It doesn't say that at all. It just means don't give reality to this world. It's just like video games, putting virtual reality glasses on, and we get caught up, and then we go, no, I don't want to take them off. Just give me 5 more minutes. And then your friend's like, okay, time's up, buddy. No, just 5 more minutes. In other words, 5 more years, right? And then that's how we. So don't do that. Take the glasses off.
Actually, Adi Shankara is very gruesome about a lot of things. Even in Bhajagovindam, he says
Yeah.
the body is only bone,
Oh,
flesh,
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
blood.
I remember
And if
that
you
part.
had it outside, would you admire it?
I know. So look at people, it's just bones
Or
and
look at a woman and
bag
think
of
it's all
blood
bone, flesh,
Bag
and
of
blood.
pus.
that's why I like his work. He's so direct and honest about it.